Hello everyone, I am Mary Chris from BS Ed 1A. Today I will discuss the distinct features of Chinese English. Before I proceed to my discussion, I would like to ask what is Chinese English first. Chinese English is an interlanguage used by Mandarin speaking English learners in China. It is easily understood as being English by inner circle speakers, but it often contains so-called language one interference or Mandarin structural features. The term China English has by now been well defined by linguists over the past 20 years. One of the most quoted writers on this particular topic is Li Wenjong, whose definition has been used by dozens of succeeding researchers. From the introduction of the distinctive features of China English, it is said that it is universally acknowledged that with the revolution of information technology, traditional boundaries of human society fall away. Our culture, politics, society, and commerce are being involved into a large melting pot of humanity. There is no monolingual country, and it is the destiny of human beings to be confronted not by one language but by several, which naturally possess problems of communication. In fact, English is on the way of developing into a global language, which demonstrates that English now is a multinational, multicultural, multiformal, and multifunctional language. In other words, English is no longer an individual language, but a language family where many English varieties were born and are developing and coexisting. In today's world, the trend of English globalization is irreversible, which means it has an increasingly large amount of English-speaking population. Castro in 1985 divided them into three groups in the form of three concentric circles. The inner circle, where people speak English as a native language. The outer circle, where people speak it as a second language. And the expanding circle, where people speak it as a foreign language. At the beginning, China English uses British or American English as its standard, which is now generally regarded as just two English varieties, and many countries have announced the independence of their Englishes and treat them as the equal varieties as British English and American English. According to Li Xiaohua and Yang Sholong, the reason for any language to exist is its functional value, and China English can meet every communicative purpose in the exchange between China and the world. From the early 19th century till now, China has been using English for almost 2 centuries, and now the localization and nativization of English in China makes English a necessary part of quite a number of Chinese people's daily life. In addition, 1 million more were using English as a tool in their work. Therefore, we have no reason to ignore such a vigorous English variety, even though it is just a performance variety with no official status in China. Anyway, it is an effective communicational instrument. Now let's proceed to the distinctive features of Chinese English. The first is the distinctive features at the level of phonology. When asked what goals they are pursuing, most of the Chinese English learners would say that they want to acquire the ability to speak standard English as the native speakers do. But actually, there does not exist a single standard in spoken English. As Peter Roach put it, the idea of a standard received pronunciation is a convenient fiction, not a scientific fact. As a matter of fact, Received pronunciation or RP is just practiced by the most educated and cultivated learners. Different varieties of English have their own suprasegmental features, and their principal features lie in syllable, stress, tone, and intonation, which will naturally express the speaker's nationality identity. And each English variety has its own peculiarities in pronunciation. Therefore, the sound pattern of China English has nothing to do with the standard. It is just a question of appropriateness to the given situation. China English, a language phenomena with its capacity to voice ideas and clearly and effectively. It reveals its cultural style and national identity in a very natural manner, and therefore it should be allowed to exist. So let's proceed to the second distinctive features of Chinese English at the level of vocabulary. We all know that language can hardly survive in isolation but instead should always be in close contact with one another. Knowing the various factors such as colonization, migration, trade, scientific or art exchanges, where there is language contact and surely word borrowings. Lack of proper equivalence in native English may be an important factor of vocabulary borrowing. In terms of political influence, China English plays a very important role in safeguarding the national dignity and sovereignty. Proceed to the distinctive features at the level of sentence. Different languages have different sentence structures that can achieve the same aesthetic results since beauty is not a quality but an effect. Different languages have its own way to pursue beauty. Due to different ways of thinking, English people attach more attention to hypotaxis and tend to use logical connectives in making a grammatical connection when there is more than one independent clause. On the contrary, Chinese prefer parataxis and they resort to reasoning for achieving logical coherence. For example, one for all for one. One couple, one child. One country, two systems. Instead of being stated, the relations between ideas are suggested and implied in China English, where implicit connectives are not necessary. Sometimes, even subject can also be omitted in China English, which makes the sentence more direct and concise. Another example is very glad to see you, long time no see. Sentences as listed above without subject are quite typical in China English. Meanwhile, parallel structures characterized by conciseness, rhythm, and symmetric beauty also wins the affection of Chinese people and makes itself at home in China English. After analyzing the features of China English at sentence level, we can see that the distinctive sentence structures benefit English in terms of various ways of delicate expression. They can become useful and valuable stylistic devices in English. The last one is the distinctive features at the level of text and discourse. Text and discourse style of a language is largely determined by the world outlook, philosophical view, value system, and thinking patterns which vary from nation to nation. And each culture has its dream of being known, understood, and even appreciated by the whole world. So it is important and necessary to present its ideology and culture uniqueness through text and discourse, which is the very mirror of the cultural convention and tradition behind a language. Chinese communicate less directly and less implicitly. Having originated from agricultural village society, they communicate in a manner conducive to what intercultural communication pundits call an implicit social environment. In such group, much of what needs to be communicated can simply be implied rather than stated implicitly. In conclusion, the English language has become so important in China because the country wants to successfully promote internationalism and keep the lines of communication open for trade and business matters. As one of the global powers, it is the country's best interest to keep afloat of shifting trends in international matters. Finally, China English is a developing world variety of English. It has unique features including phonology, lexicon, syntax, and discourse patterns, and therefore it fulfills 3 out of Butler's 5 criteria towards becoming a native-based variety. As China develops socially and opens economically over the next decade, the use of English there will be only widened and further refined into an established, expanding circle of world English.